Hello and welcome back to the AFL High Performance Podcast. My name is Jack McLean, and today I'm lucky enough to be joined by Tom Tombleson, who's our guest. We'll be discussing everything that you need to know when it comes to high performance reconditioning for team field sports. And if you are tuning in live on YouTube or on LinkedIn, feel free to send through your questions, and we'll make sure to try and fit them in later on in the show. But welcome, Tom. Thanks for joining, mate. Looking forward to our chat around reconditioning for team-based athletes.
Cheers, Jack. Thanks, mate. Thank you.
No doubt, strength and conditioning coaches and athlete development coaches, sports scientists would be well aware of your background, Tom. But for those that are tuning in, perhaps parents of athletes and athletes of the like that aren't aware of your journey so far, do you mind providing, I guess, a background on how it all started, your passion for high performance and different work roles you've had over your career to date?
Yeah, no worries. I think we probably would have started when I was at school, and as a budding player, I wanted to play professional rugby, I wanted to play for England, and all those things as a young lad. And I remember, God, yeah, actually, I remember us being given some pre-season programs, and me and my best friend we were into the weights, into the strength training because we'd probably watched too many Schwarzenegger films, and we were given bodybuilding and in our season program. I remember thinking at the time, I'm not sure, even at 16 years old, I'm not sure I need to be doing this. I'd love to do something a bit more athletic, a bit more dynamic, and that probably lit the match for wanting to be a bit more conscientious about how people are physically prepared. Because I was just wanting a bit more. I was interested throughout the whole of school in that regard. I started writing programs for the school team and even some of the teachers, and it suited me, that kind of procedural format of getting from A to B, and that sort of that linear, or non-linear process as it ends up being. And from 17, 18, I kind of knew I wanted to do something in physical preparation, and my degrees and my work experience all orientated around that from being a late teen, really, I'd say. I went to university while playing semi-professionally at various places, and I kind of went through that process until my late 20s, when I was playing and coaching at Sydney University rugby. And then a job came up at the New South Wales Waratahs, and my sort of full-time professional journey started from there. And I had to give up competitive rugby anyway because of a neck injury. And then I went from the Waratahs to then 10 years with England senior rugby to where I'm just finishing up now with Great Britain Rugby Sevens, in a nutshell.
And highlights, mate, that you spring front of mind when you're reflecting over your career so far that you're most proud
Um,
of?
yeah, I'd say it's there's been a couple of times when we've been in the doldrums, and we've been at sort of a basement level, and then we've sort of whatever team it is somehow had a bit of a sort of a bounce back. So in 2012, the Waratahs were near the bottom of the table. We were down and out, even though we had a team full of talent. And then 2013, Michael Checker comes in, and then a year later we won the Super Rugby title, and that was probably even still my career highlight because it was a team I've been with for a number of years. It was an amazing journey from being competitive to being really poor to being upturning again. And those highlights for me aren't just sort of the tangible success, it's the development and the learning you get in the process of it. And that was a really big sounding board for me to then go on to other things. That was a big highlight for me. Also, in a similar note, when I joined England, we had a terrible World Cup in 2015. We didn't get up our group. And then 6 months later, Eddie Jones comes in, one of your countrymen, and we won the Six Nations Grand Slam, which is the highest accolade you can have in international rugby outside of a World Cup win. And that was a really big highlight for me. So those stand out. There's been some good ones over the years, but they're probably the two that stick out the most. Again, because there was a trophy, but there was a big sort of learning and development journey along the way, which I still hold on to even these days now, I'd say.
And what about on the flip side? Obviously, in high performance sport, there is pressure every day to perform and push boundaries. What have some of the biggest challenges you've faced? You mentioned the sort of early days when you guys were at the bottom there in those developing years. What did you sort of learn from those challenges as a coach?
Well, they were when I was a bit younger, and they when you have a failure as a team and you're a young coach, it rattles your philosophy a little bit. It tests your philosophy, and if you're at all introspective, you're looking at it saying, was anything to do with me? And I certainly at the time was more of, oh, this was nothing to do with me. What I'm doing here is battle hard, and it was elsewhere. But that's that's obviously not very inward facing, is it? So the issue there is that it challenges what you thought was true and what you thought was right. And then if that's challenged, what else have you got?
Mm.
So kind of in those years learning from it and still formulating a philosophy that had the same principles that you believed in from the start, while there's all the chaos of that being challenged, that they were challenges. And then, from the obviously a more important point is you've actually got the effect to your job and the working relationships with others when things have gone poorly. Well, I just mentioned Waratahs 2012, we were bottom of the ladder. England 2015 was the lowest ebb for England rugby, and you're sitting there going, I hope I've got a chance to make amends for this, but do I have the skills to make amends for this? And that's just, as a young coach, you ask yourself those questions. But looking back at them, they were the kind of periods that even though you don't want them, they were brilliant for you.
Mm.
It kept your ego at bay. It made you challenge and ask questions of yourself and what you were doing technically, philosophically. And you end up looking at them and going, yeah, these are bad times, but if you learn from it, they can be useful.
And what was the most productive sort of process for you? Was it speaking to mentors, if you like, or colleagues that you're working with facing the same challenge? Was it
Yeah.
more, reflecting yourself and building a reflection sort of process around your own methods? So, yeah, what was some things that you sort of put in
Well, yeah.
place to make it productive?
There's always you always bounce off people in your network, and you ask them what they would have done differently or what they thought of it. But inevitably you're going to give them a spin on things that are a little bit more favorable to you. Like if your girlfriend is complaining to her other girlfriend about you, she's probably not saying, there's probably a story that's somewhere in the middle, isn't there? So
Yeah.
those things always helped, but it what really helped is when that team had a really thorough, rigorous, fair income debriefing process. And if you did that, you could have confidence in what you did right and what you did wrong, and what you can do next. And generally those two sort of instances I mentioned, 2012, 2015 with England, they had a pretty thorough debriefing process. And you cast your net out quite wide to find out what went wrong. And one of the biggest things I got from it was to ask the players who I trusted what they thought that should have been done differently, and the candid ones tell you the truth. And they're as good as anything because they're on the ground, they feel it, you see it. Add the two together, you normally have a pretty good process.
Yeah, that's great. Appreciate that. It's a good insight for coaches or of any level, tactical, technical, as well as support staff that might be going through sort of similar situation. Um, so the club goes through that sort of deep dive feedback, and then did you sort of probe players that you found that you had a good relationship with for a bit more information around what had sort of come up in the room,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
and, and feedback? Yeah.
Well, but the thing is, it's human nature that sometimes you don't want to say the things that hurt. So you pick the players that you trust, but also the ones that can tell you the truth.
Mm.
Because it's human nature. You sometimes, if someone asks you a question like that, your first thought is, I don't want to tell them that this was shit. So you do it in a way that's diplomatic, but you need to know, if you want to know that, the warts behind everything, you need to know the truth, don't you? So timing's everything. You can't just do it in the changing room after you've had the last game of the year and you're at the bottom of the ladder. Like, you do it later with reflection. Maybe you ask twice. Maybe you seek a bit more of a formal feedback process. I'd often do that. I'd ask the players to complete like well, not a pro forma, like a questionnaire that had questions that were fairly detailed, that weren't just yes or no answers, that were a bit more probing. But on the start of the process, you'd ask them, look, you've got permission to be completely honest without me getting all sensitive about it. So you'd almost, ask them and give them, what's the word, permission to be as rigorous as they can. And you cast your net out, so you've got quite a diverse group: young blokes, old blokes, blokes from different cultures, players that have been in very different, very successful teams already that can give you a contrast, technical coaches, consultants that come in and out. You make sure that you've got a pretty good pool of opinion, and
And how
then
did you
make
filter
sure,
the information from, like,
yeah,
I imagine that, you're getting a volume there, and potentially some you might find that might not be that relevant,
yeah.
and then others
Look at the
like, yeah, I think
commons.
they've hit the nail there.
Look at the common points, the ones that that happen, over and over again. Because again, you can't please everyone. Some players are going to say something that no one else thinks. And if that's the
Mm.
case, you make a note of it for that person next time. But like, this isn't going to be the main thing here that I go after. But if I'm coaching this person individually, it's something to bear, put in your player file and go, this is something to consider for next time. It's just, the whole point of all these things is to move forward, isn't it? So if this feedback was actionable, it would be a lot more impactful. What can I do about it now? What repair work do I need to get done here? Are there any relationships that need to be repaired? There'll be times when I was too bullish as a young coach, where there were relationships that need to be readdressed, and that was probably down to me being too dogmatic or aggressive with a philosophy that I was trying to hold on to too tightly. I can think of instances like that straight away. So that's a part of it as well. It's not all about technically. It's not all about how did, why was the gym, why were they not as strong as they should have been? Should we have done this
Mm.
different set rep scheme? Inevitably, this was about building, a lot of the time, it might be about building bridges again with people that you may have disconnected with, or, maybe the trust process was falling down a little bit.
Mm. No, it's a
And
good
that's
insight. Uh,
a
uh,
lot of that's admitting fault. I was responsible for that. I got that wrong. I'm going to do this
yeah.
about it. Happen again.
And what about the follow up with, if you do send out a questionnaire, which I can imagine it's a safe place for, like, especially if you're initiating them, to be robust in their response and to really, be as honest, open and honest as possible. Um, you can see how that would be quite effective. How do you, if you are doing it at the end of the year, where you might not see the athletes for a number of weeks, do you follow up when they come back, or is it more just a follow up message back or phone call, or?
Yeah, I'd rather do it face to face. And so depending on how long the off season was, I would either, I think I did it face to face or on the phone. I would tell them, look, this is what I've taken from it. This is what I'm going to do about it. Because, as a
Yeah,
player, how many times as a player given information, whether it be monitoring or end of year debrief or reviews, and then once they're given the information through, that's it. They never hear from it again.
yeah,
So I'd tell the player that this is what I've got from it. This is what I'm hearing. Just so you know, I heard this from you. I listened to this. This is what I'm going to do about it. And if I'm not doing it, I need you to mention it to me, and we're going to review it at these periods. And then systematically, I go through. I'm talking generally here. I might
mm,
hit a player informally and go, look, this is what I said I was going to do. How you find this is working? Are you getting the most from it? And I'll just try and have those conversations, periodically, to the point where it doesn't seem to be an issue anymore. But I'd still review it, just not as often. Maybe
yeah,
go into
yeah,
being sort of biannually versus quarterly or whatnot.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, fantastic. Very good. Well, yeah, good segue into our topic around reconditioning and return to performance. A good way to start is, I guess, bridging the gap between a medical sort of cleared time based, perhaps, return to play, compared to, game ready, or return to performance that's commonly used at the moment. Do you feel like there is a difference? And if there is, for example, the doctors cleared them off, they're ready to play, or the surgeon says, yep, they'll be ready to play in 8 weeks. But you might see differently from a reconditioning point of view and their actually ability to perform their role. What are some of your key processes, I guess, to ensure that the athlete's ready? whether it be subjective to the athlete feeling confident to some clear markers.
Well, so that's pro sport. That happens, doesn't it? That definitely happens, especially if the team's relying on someone. Some of the processes used to clear people. Sometimes they fall away. Just we need this guy on the field. Like that's inevitable. It does happen. Absolutely, it does happen. Sometimes you'll sit down with a coach and they'll say to you, "I need this player back on this game," and you might have in your mind, "Well, this guy's got at least 2 or 3 more weeks before that's early. It's not going, and then the question there will be, there'll either be a butting at heads or there'll either be a more favourable response is, right, I'll do our very best to do that. You don't say, no, he won't be ready for 2 weeks after that. It's more of a case of, okay, this is what the coach needs. We'll do our best. We're not going to say it will happen. We're just going to reassure him that you're doing everything we can to make that happen. And from my experience, that's enough. A lot of the times we've got players back early against traditional timelines, and perhaps if it wasn't from the pressure from the coach to do that, it wouldn't have happened because you follow your plan, whatever process you use to get to that page. But it was that push and that pressure that actually helps you raise your game.
Agency.
So often these things are quite facilitative and they're good for us. And the point is, you're not guaranteeing anything, but you're just saying, I'll do everything I can to make that happen. And these are the markers we're going to use, and bring that coach into the equation and say, look, what would you like to see in training that tells you he's ready? And then he can actually be a part of that end stage return to play process as well, or at least someone from the technical team.
But for things like, I guess it's hard unless you're talking specifics, but let's just say it's like a hamstring injury. What would be some of your non-negotiables for preparing a player to play? It's not just the coach that says that they want him at that date, but also 2 weeks prior to that date, the athlete's really pushing and bullish as well, and feeling like they're ready to train, and they're pushing for that date as well. What would be some things that you want to see over those 2 weeks to ensure that you're confident that they're ready to play?
Well, there's a couple of pillars to this, isn't there? There's the repair, remodeling, reconditioning component physically, but then there's the confidence piece that rehab needs to hit. And this is a bit more subjective, but their body language and the confidence in that person's body is something you want to see, that they've got a posture and a non-verbal comms that's telling them that they're ready to go. And if you know the individual well, you'll know, well, this guy isn't very good at this. He's a cowboy. He's just going to want to play anyway. Or you've got, on the other side of the coin, you've got these guys that are super conservative and worrywarts. And if you see that their body language is going up, they look confident, then you know you're making hay. For me, I've always had a kind of a principle of having 2 weeks of team training before they play at the end of that second week, because the first week of team training is you're integrating into the chaos and the cognitive load of training that you just couldn't prepare them for in rehab. Even if it's a progressive approach to reintegrating into training and not a graduation from rehab into team training, which is something I prefer not to do. And then once you've done that week under your belt, you've then got the week of training leading into the game. I've never been a fan of coming into that week and training and playing at the end of that week. For me, it's just too much of a jump on multiple stressors. So a 2 week process, battle testing the position, action, mechanism that got them hurt. So if someone's chasing a kick and they've had to swerve and slow down, can they do that? Again, that's as much as confidence as anything else, the confidence piece. There'd be a whole load of kinetic markers that you'd want ticked off that are within or exceed the baseline levels that you might have had from previous assessments. There'd be a movement expression piece, a kinematic analysis whereby you think that the technical model, whether that be change of direction, acceleration, top speed, anything more sporting technically orientated, that is in the region of being acceptable itself. So for a top speed sprinter, they're not over pushing dramatically on one side. They're not braking excessively on one side. There's no drastic asymmetries or aberrations to that technical model you've got in place. You've addressed that. Maybe there was a driver that led to that rehab which was an indirect influence to the injury, and you've done a good job on making sure that that has been addressed and isn't a risk for reoccurrence as well. So there's a few things in there. It's a movement efficiency piece. There's health, there's movement efficiency, and then there's some of those performance metrics, which are just your raw force potentials and raw power outputs that you want to be within, acceptable placement of what they can do when they're healthy and they're fit and they're performing.
What if the everything's going quite well from your perspective, with their strength and movement competency and just the progressions and the way that they're tolerating the rehab running, and perhaps integration into lower intensity football training drills with the team, and you're tracking towards that 2 week mark where you think, oh, this guy will be ready to full train, for 2 weeks, and then he does his match load and play. But the medical team are pushing pretty hard. The scan, they're talking about aponeurosis, pretty significant strain on the scan, but also clinically they're a bit concerned with their testing and from what they're seeing with palpation and that sort of things. So I guess there's a gap between medical and performance. How do you go about managing that sort of challenge?
So you can follow sort of healing models, can't you? And you can and if imaging's certainly with something like an aponeurosis or connective tissue issue, if you've re-imaged and you found that the healing isn't up to the degree that you want it to, that's reason for delaying return to play. But you want to keep your eye on those objective markers, totally, especially with something like a tendon issue where quite often you've got a bit of an accelerated increase in function quite initially, but then there's that end stage which can be a bit niggly. So you want to go through the re-imaging process. That's important, but you'd like to think that your training battery has got some velocity, some speed, some high intensity actions to it that are testing the capability of those elastic properties, and you've got a density pattern to it that means that they can do it repeatedly within a session, but over time, over consecutive days if needs be, and then week after week. So if the imaging is supplementing what you're seeing on the field with regards to function, and when I say function, I mean capability to perform the actions that they are used to performing, and then the capacity to do those over a period of time repeatedly and with density, then you can give medical teams confidence that we've put this guy through the ringer, and all of the issues that may have precluded him to an injury, that might be at risk for re-injury, they've been covered, and they've been covered again. So I definitely respect that the objective approach to it. I think if rarely would I see, let's just say you've re-imaged a tendon and it's not healed, rarely would function counteract that. I think that from my experience, they would tend to go hand in hand. If the tendon hasn't healed, it means they're about 85% off top speed, or kicking velocity is different, or all these things. So they tend to go hand in hand to me. And so I'm not sure I'd be in a position where the medical teams wanted to hold back on something objective that they hadn't covered, structurally on the field, functioning on the field.
And have you had scenarios where you're happy with the process and the progressions and their function in terms of strength and running progressions, and the re-image hasn't shown enough healing to progress to the next step, and you've gone off the scan?
I personally haven't because I think it's going to be related to what you're seeing on the imaging. There's going to be interpretation and with regards to how the radiologist is interpreting this, but generally if someone's doing all the high intensity actions repeatedly and over again, the tendon's in a healthy position, unless you're looking at how they're doing it and they've got a severe compensation issue. But then that goes back to making sure that your technical model is valid enough for it to be a point of reference. So if you're running and you're heel striking on one side, but you're propelling off one side, one side's over pushing, one side's not, one side's over braking, but they're running fast, then you're like, that's still not okay for me.
They're
because he's
compensating. Yeah.
working around it. This is a time bomb.
Yeah.
So the answer to your question is I haven't experienced that because the technical model was always being referenced at the same time.
Hmm. And how do you measure your technical model? Was that with iPhone filming
Well,
or
yeah. Like ideally, you've got one, and for all of your major actions. But I mean, in rugby, our front rows had a technical model for a loose head or for a tight head, the way they'd scrummage. You know, a technical model for anyone that lifts in the line out. These are technical skills, but ideally, you've got technical models in place for acceleration, change of direction, and top speed running. We used to have with England. We used to have a technical model for how our our wide our wingers would jump up to the ball and win the ball back if they've chased a contestable kick. That would have a technical model to it. And if you're able to, which is your utopia, really, you've got those technical models in place for when they're healthy. So you know what their bandwidths are when they're technically healthy. When I say healthy, they're performing, training fully, whatnot. And then if they get injured, you can reference through stages of your return to play how they're operating those in those tasks versus the technical model when they're, I'll quote Bill Knowles, they're athletically normal.
Mhm.
So you're just keeping that eye on the whole time and you're using video, high capture video. Like for me, the iPhone is as good as anything, but there's AI now, isn't there? There's view motion, there's breakaway, there's things you can use like that. But I've always just used my iPhone because my personal technical model has come from people that weren't using AI. It might be from people that you trust. You can use AI by all means, but I've got a technical model in place for these things that I know what I think's an extreme issue or something that needs to be addressed or something that I think is acceptable. And you're just tracking them almost in those initial weeks, you're filming them every time they run,
Mhm.
fresh and fatigued. And if they're holding up when they're fatigued, this guy's keeping these principles, this technical model called watertight, even when he's bucked, when he's knackered. I'm okay here. This is a stable pattern. It's put under pressure and he's holding true to it. So, but and again, like
And
it's
with
just a
the
video. Yeah.
yeah, it'd be good to unpack the technical model for coaches that don't have one and are looking to bring one into their process. So you mentioned, it's pretty easy. Use your phone. Um, is it as simple as, while you're coaching the athlete and they're about to do their first set of 60s, for example, you'll stand on the side, front, rear view, and just take some vision, or is it a matter of setting it up a bit more like a lab where the dimensions of 20 meters away, 15 meters away, using a stand, so forth.
Yeah, it's got to be something that's repeatable. So if you're on tour and you've got to do it, you've got to be able to do it anywhere, don't you? And also, if it's too clinical, then it's not the game. So maybe initially in rehab, you'd start clinically. You might be an acceleration from 1 to 10 meters. It might be a fly. But then for me, the technical model's got true worth when they're performing upright running, for example, in a game situation. So ultimately, you want to get to a position where maybe we're progressing from let's just say a 10-meter fly to performing a kick chase in training down the wing, and you're videoing that, and you're knowing that even though he's about to have to jump in the air and win a ball back, his upright running postures, his mechanics were, within touching distance, well, within acceptable overlay of what they were doing in a more clinical format.
Mm.
He was running down the wing, he was about to jump for the ball, and he still wasn't overstriding. He still spent as much time on one leg as he did on the other contact times. That's for me your homing beacon is them doing it in those sort of functional contexts. And again, you only need
And
a
is
you only
that
need
the measuring of I guess their efficiency? Are you big on kilograms, or do you
yeah
like to just sort of see it over the context of the whole duration of the run and sort of in slow motion?
yeah. I mean, kilograms are great because you get to freeze frame postures which are important or attractors you might want to call them. So I'd look at real time footage, slow motion footage, and kilogram. Absolutely. So, it might be important to kilogram, at the start of when they get to top speed, and you can do this with GPS now. And then at the end, as you might perceive a form breakdown, or just as they're about to kickstand up into a vertical jump. So I think again, the more context you have for this, the better. You can perform one stride well, and then you could take that away, look at the kilogram of it, and go, "That was great." But was he like that in the preceding strikes? Was he like that in the strides prior to his,
Mm.
form starting to break down, just from when you were looking at it with a naked eye? So the more info, the better. Obviously, it has challenges with analysis, but I think over time you start to get an idea about what are those crux moments in an action, and then you just home in on them.
And when you do see a breakdown in the technical model with, yeah, let's go back to the acceleration, how are you using that information to sort of inform the preparation to train, the field sessions, and then the gym?
That's so I'd break it down in a kilogram format there, and you're relying on the fact that certainly with some actions, like whether that be, let's just say in rugby, it's a breakdown or a tackle, you're filming actions that are performed in the time scale that they would be in competition. So it's a full acceleration into that collision. It's a maximum intent acceleration off the line if you're going to hit a bag. You're not doing it as a jog and then freeze framing it and going, look at this kilogram, this shows he's right. It's not. The actions are to the same level of intent and aggression that you would be when you're on the field. And once you freeze frame those and create a kilogram based off them, you can then start to look at positions that you think are vulnerable and not stable, and you can drip feed in medicine. I use the term medicine, but doses of technical work in warm-ups, whether that be running drills or more sporting technically based drills, as a part of your priming or individual preparation or even team preparation that leads into that session. And then similarly, based on what your philosophy is in the weight room, how specific you go with your, transfer to your sport, those technical models should really have context behind what you're doing with regards to resistance training. I know there's going to be some
Mhm.
general stuff in there, but your special exercises ideally are related to the obviously the components of that technical model on an individual and a team and a positional basis.
And what would be a good example of a classic case of what you'd see in terms of those special sort of strength exercises that you'd use with a hamstring strain?
So for me, the special exercises are on the field in gait. Like for me, it's not. It might be something that is putting the hamstring under a lot of pressure. That's a gait modified drill. It might be a very close generational exercise to running. That might be a high speed dribble. It might be a scissor band bleed. It might be like an in and out sprint. So they're putting the hammer down, they're floating, and then they're going again, which often might be the case if you're playing on the edge and you've got to slow down to readjust to then go again, if you're especially putting pressure on another kicker or if you're trying to track the ball in flight. Those types of drills are pretty close motor skills to what you want to be doing when the ball's involved, but they're
Mhm.
not, they're a little bit more stable, a little bit more um, closed loop. And I would use those for hamstrings, especially the velocity, the contact times, the stride lengths are virtually the same as what they're going to be experiencing when they're put under that much pressure on the field. So they would be my first port of call for hamstring return to play. Those type of exercises in gait, highly speed specific. Weight room stuff, take your pick. I prefer exercises that have got your foot in contact with the floor and it's controlling, your torso and your body weight. Initially slow and heavy, building into more dynamic and reactive to the position where they're sort of stable postures that when you've had a load of those postures together, they look like they are on the field.
Mhm.
Um, those type of exercises, they're all the exercises that you'd know, but they would be sort of second generational hamstring type return to play markers alongside the more, what's the word, direct influences of those drills I just mentioned on the field.
James Tatum who's a strength and conditioning coach for the Australian Institute of Sport, has sent in a question, Tom. So he's written, criteria-based return to play is common. Final criteria is often athlete declaration on readiness. What are some trade secrets on differences in return to play philosophy/process when operating in a development athlete context versus a elite athlete?
Development. I must admit, I've not been with development athletes in a few years, but we do often get players who've come through that are quite capable early. So we've had a couple of back rowers with England when I was there last. That were sort of 18, 19 that were very, very capable. You could argue they're developing, even though they are very, very capable in of themselves. For me, it's just they've still got to be ready for the game. So we're assuming that the person that Jimbo's talking about is that they're playing competitively, but they're still in a development period. Or is he talking about sort of long-term athletic development youth athletes?
He didn't say, but yeah, I think for this sake, it would be development, like youth athletes that are still competing. Yeah,
Yeah,
so I guess
yeah,
that's how I've interpreted it anyway. How would you manage a young athlete? Maybe it's their first hamstring strain compared to an elite athlete that is a
right.
bit of an experienced athlete and competing professionally.
Probably two sort of strains of thought here. One, it doesn't matter who you are, you've got to be ready for the game. So there'll be similarity between, a developmental player that needs to return to play and an experienced player. They have to be ready for the game. So the demands of the game have to be covered off. That be the worst case scenarios in a game, absolute values of a game, the training week leading into the game, the 2 weeks leading into the game, that they need to be able to have that under their belt in order to strive and not just cope. The difference between the youth and the experienced athletes is that maybe the experienced athlete doesn't need quite so much work getting to that stage as the youth athlete might. They've got the development athlete's got a much bigger training history. They've got the experience. They'll have certain efficiency and pacing strategies. That their capacity for their sport is going to be higher. So there won't be then quite so much need for some of the more general work that you feel that some of the capacities in the youth athlete might be lacking. I'm assuming that an experienced athlete's got a pretty stable technical model in any of the actions that are important to his game, whereas a developing one that might need to be addressed a little bit more aggressively, especially if you think there's some aberrations here that puts that player under reoccurrence risk. Especially, let's just say we're talking about acceleration, change of direction, slowing down, braking, decelerating, top speed. So I'd probably be a little bit more anal on being very directive on some of those sort of key tenets around those big actions, making sure that we're doing the best I can to make sure that whatever sort of physical habits are in place are stable and are going to be continued to work on over time. I think I think I'd just be a little bit more accepting of things that were close to being outside of those bandwidths.
Yeah, yeah. Well said. Makes sense. Yeah, good question, James. Thanks for sending through. Last few questions, Tom. These ones are more outside of our topic, but in your work life, what makes you angry? Have you got any pet peeves from an industry perspective?
Outside of work life, littering, litter bugs. Is that a good example? A good example?
Yeah, yeah. Litter bugs, did you say?
I was driving down. I was driving my car, and someone in front of me just got a packet of McDonald's and just held it out the side of the car. I can't get my head around that. How someone would do that.
Yeah,
So that's going way off topic, littering. But
yeah, yeah. That's a good
just
one.
generally, greed
Yeah,
in
yeah,
whatever form. Mind games, lack of honesty. Can't stand that. Hate that.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Good ones. And what about a favorite way to spend a day off?
Late brekkie, couple of poached eggs on sourdough with some avocado. Love that. Walk the dog. ideally in some mild sun, not brutal sun. Get amongst the greenery, so some trees and some grass would be good. Do some exercise, muck about with the kids, maybe watch a family movie at the end of the day. That's pretty sounds like a cool day to me. The 180 to that would be good night out with the boys. Don't need to get trolleyed or anything. Let's have a good laugh, connect with some of your brothers, and come home without too much of a late night. That'd be a good one for me.
Yeah, yeah. And what about an opinion or belief that you hold that goes against mainstream thinking or challenges popular consensus?
Um, Two maybe. Strength does not cure all. Like, it is not the remedy we think it is. It's a part of the process, but ultimately, the output isn't enough. Like, I think there is something that needs to be said about with regards to how people do things, because like I mentioned before, athletes are great compensators, and you don't want time bombs sitting on the shelf. If just because someone can do something doesn't mean they can do it forever if they're doing it in a way that's too cost effective. And then secondly, just from more of a soft skill perspective, I think we can all, I think with players we can be more honest than we are. Like these guys, a lot of these guys are very hyper competitive at a certain level, and they want the truth. They want to progress. They want to be the best actually they can. But certainly in some of the environments I've been to, it's there's a reticence to tell people the truth because we think of how they're going to react. But my experience is that if you do it in a respectful way, react really well, and it's a great trust building process because the very nature of telling someone the truth, because it is hard, more often than not, the person who's receiving it, it tells them you care about them enough to do it. The easiest thing in the world would be just to pump someone's tires up, tell them some fluff and walk away. That's not showing, care about anyone, including that player or the team. So, yeah, I think well, it's not a mainstream belief, but it's quite often not done, is it? Being honest about things, like I said, in a manner that's digestible.
On that topic, because it's a good one. How far? What's a good barometer for you when you know you're ready to bring that, not confronting, but open and honest conversation with the athletes you're working with? Is that,
Yeah.
after, is it a time-based thing, or is it more just a feel thing where okay, we've built a level of good rapport here. I feel like I can get straight in
Yeah.
and challenge
I
the
think
athlete.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's time based because there's inevitably there's players I would have worked with for 10 years that I probably couldn't be as honest with compared to someone that I knew for 6 months.
Yeah,
Um, I think it's hard to know and it takes a bit of EQ, doesn't it? But I think if you ask for permission to be honest with someone, then you'll see their reaction and you'll know how far to go. Like if their eyes light up, they turn around to you fully facing, they go, "Yeah, absolutely." I think regardless of how long you've known them, that's a good in. And as you're doing it, like I said, if it's in a respectful way that shows that's not a personal attack, it's just about doing this for a reason of helping that person improve their game or their life, then how many people are going to counteract that? I think if they look at you half shoulder turned, stooping shoulders, and they give you a sort of a hesitant yes, you can be honest, then you're like, okay, that's not a convincing answer to that question. I'm going to do this at a certain level. And then
yeah,
maybe over time, this is going to be a bit more comprehensive. But let's just say you've got a situation where someone's like that. You tell them the truth there. You ask them, this is what I'm seeing. Am I right? Because it doesn't mean you're right. Just because you're seeing something or something's happened doesn't mean that what you've seen is the truth. So you ask him, perhaps if I'm seeing this. Is this true? Is there any truth in it? And I think if the more you do that, the more you show that you're trying to help them with their careers, trust builds up, and then you start to do it a bit more informally, a bit more without being so clinically deliberate with it. Again, it's a hard one to sort of paint a structured picture on. I think it's a bit of a feel thing, isn't it?
Oh, for sure, for sure. But I think the articulated is a good way, for anyone really looking to raise the standards, I guess, for their environment. So, good
Yeah.
good note to finish
That's
on
what it's
as
all about.
well.
That's what it's all about, isn't it? That's what it's all about.
What's that? Oh,
Raising
raising
the
the
standards of
standards.
the
Yeah,
environment. Yeah.
yeah. But it's our performance at the end of the day, isn't it? So if you want to
Yeah,
be world
exactly.
class, you need more people driving the standards. Yeah. Um, yeah. Final question, mate. What's on the horizon for 2025? Obviously, over the halfway point of the year so far. What are you most excited about for the rest of the year?
Well, I'm working in English football now, so soccer for some people, and in the English Premier League. So we start in a few weeks. That'll be come around before you know it. So I'll be fully immersed in that perhaps by the time your listeners are listening to this. And that's my focus. And then, continue to learn, continue to develop, continue to improve, be the best I can be, grow as a professional, be a good dad, good husband, keep cracking on and trying on that. And haven't done a great job on that one yet. So I'm going to keep cracking on with that, give it a bit more time to that side of the equation as well, I hope.
Yeah. The beauty of off seasons, hey?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
My off season
Well,
is as soon as off season comes to me, my my family's go to Spain to see family. So what does that tell you? My off season is looking into a computer screen.
uh,
A joke.
it's good. Well, yeah. From on behalf of everyone that's tuned in, Tom, really appreciate. I've got a couple of pages of notes. Obviously, someone that's working in reconditioning, hugely valuable for myself, but no doubt for listeners as well, and no doubt for athletes that we spent a good amount of time there on the people side of things and the art of coaching and leadership qualities as well. So no doubt athletes tuning in have got some takeaways. But for those that want to connect and perhaps have some follow-up questions, where's the best place to connect? Your social media person, or is it email? What's your favorite platform?
My social media, my Twitter, X handles, and Instagram. That's all Tom Tombleson at those places. So if you search them, if you want to get me on email, it's tomtombleson@hotmail.com. But yeah, I mean, I haven't got any funky nicknames. It's just my name on those platforms. So yeah, you can find me on there. Just typing my name in. There's not
Nice and
many of
easy.
me.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, for those that are driving or walking the dog, whatever it might be, you can we'll add the links to Tom's Instagram and X in the show notes, so you'll be able to access there. And if you've tuned in halfway through it, just the end here at YouTube live, this will live on our YouTube channel to release on our podcast the next month. So make sure to wind back to the very start. We go straight into the reconditioning and some high performance tips. And our next live chat is with Jared Hall, which will be he's the high performance coach at the Adelaide Pros, which will be 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, Thursday, the 7th of August. So look forward to seeing you guys then. Thanks again, Tom.